You're listening to the Matuta podcast, bringing you the latest insights into transformational business, coaching, ABM, automated marketing, and AI solutions.
Hello, and welcome to today's episode. I'm Simon, and over the next half an hour or so, we're going to explore something that I believe sits right at the heart of modern marketing leadership, the voice of strategy, and specifically where the role of the Chief Marketing Officer meets communications. Now, if you've ever worked in marketing, or indeed if you've ever wondered why some brands seem to speak with such clarity and purpose, while others feel fragmented and confused, this conversation's for you. Because what I've come to understand over my years of working in and around this space is that the CMO isn't responsible for campaigns or creative or customer acquisitions. The CMO is fundamentally responsible for the strategic vision of the organization. And that voice, how it's shaped, how it's delivered, and how it resonates, is dictated by the communication strategy. So let's dive in. I want to take you through what I've learnt about how a CMO dictates communication strategy and why it matters so much, and how you can apply these principles whether you're leading a marketing function, an advertising one, or simply trying to make sense of how the best brands operate. So let's start with the fundamentals. The Chief Marketing Officer occupies a unique position within the executive team. Unlike the CFO, who's primarily focused inward on financial health, or the COO, who's orchestrating operations, the CMO has one foot inside the organization and one foot outside. They're the bridge between what the company is and what the world perceives it to be. This dual perspective is crucial because it means the CMO is consistently translating. They're translating the company's strategy into messages that customers understand. They're translating customer insights back into product and service innovations. They're translating marketing dynamics into strategic opportunities. And all of this translation happens through communications. But here's where it gets interesting. The CMO doesn't just communicate about strategy. They communicate through strategy. Every touch point, every campaign, every piece of content is an expression of that strategic intent. This is why I say the CMO dictates communication strategy. It's not delegated to a comms team or a PR agency. It originates from the strategic vision that the CMO holds and must articulate. If you think about the brands you admire, Apple, for instance, or perhaps Patagonia or Virgin, or what do they have in common? Well, they have a consistent, unmistakable voice that permeates everything they do. That voice didn't happen by accident. It was architected by marketing leadership who understood that communication strategy is inseparable from business strategy. So, if the CMO is the architect of this strategic voice, what are the foundations they're building on? Well, I'd argue there are four core pillars that underpin any robust communication strategy, and each one requires the CMO's direct involvement and oversight. The first pillar is the clarity of purpose. Before you communicate anything effectively, you need to know why you existed as an organization. Not what you do, why you do it. Simon Sinek has made a career out of this insight with his Start With Why framework, and he's absolutely right. Your purpose is your North Star. It's what guides every communications decision you make. As a CMO, you need to be ruthlessly clear about this purpose, and you need to be able to articulate it in a way that resonates both internally and externally. Internally, it gives your team direction. It helps them understand which stories to tell and which ones to leave behind. Externally, it gives customers a reason to care. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And if you can't articulate that why clearly and compellingly, your communications will always fall flat. The second pillar is audience intimacy. This might sound obvious, but you'd be surprised how many organizations communicate without truly understanding who they're talking to. And I don't just mean demographic data or personas scribbled on a whiteboard. I mean deep, genuine understanding of what your audience cares about, what keeps them up at night, what delights them, what frustrates them. The CMO must champion this audience centric approach because it's the only way to ensure your communication strategy is grounded in reality rather than assumption. This means investing in research, yes, but it also means creating feedback loops, listening to customer service calls, reading reviews, engaging on social media, whatever it takes to stay connected to the lived experience of your audience. The third pillar is narrative coherence. Every brand tells a story, whether intentionally or not. The question is whether that story is coherent or chaotic. Coherent narratives have a clear beginning, middle, and end. They have characters we care about, conflicts we understand, and resolutions we find satisfying. Chaotic narratives leave us confused and disengaged. As the CMO, you're essentially the chief storyteller of the organization. You decide what story the brand is telling and how that story unfolds across different channels and touchpoints. This requires discipline. It requires saying no to ideas that don't serve the narrative, even if they're clever or popular. It requires consistency over time, which can feel boring, but is actually what builds trust and recognition. And the fourth pillar is channel orchestration. We live in an incredibly fragmented media landscape. Your audience might discover you on TikTok or research you on Google, purchase from you through your website, and recommend you on LinkedIn. Each of these channels has its own language, its own norms, its own expectations, but the underlying message must remain consistent. Channel orchestration is about understanding how to adopt your core message to different contexts without losing its essence. It's about knowing when to lead with emotion and when to lead with data. It's about recognizing that a 60-second YouTube ad requires a different approach than a white paper or a trade show booth. But through it all, the strategic thread remains visible and strong. Right, so we've established the foundations. But how does a CMO actually dictate communication strategy in practice? What does this look like day to day, week to week, quarter to quarter? Let me walk you through what I consider to be essential mechanisms through which a CMO exercises strategic control over communications. First and foremost, the CMO must own the messaging framework. This is the blueprint that guides all communications. It typically includes your core value proposition, your key messages, your proof points, your tone of voice, and your visual identity guidelines. This framework isn't a static document that sits in a drawer somewhere. It's a living tool that gets referenced constantly by everyone who creates content or communicates on behalf of the brand. Creating this framework requires the CMO to make hard choices. What will we emphasize? What will we downplay? How do we want to be perceived? What trade offs are we willing to make? These decisions are fundamentally strategic because they determine how you compete for attention and preference in your market. I'll give you an example. Imagine that you're the CMO of a software company. Your product is technically sophisticated, feature rich, and powerful, but you're entering a crowded market where everyone claims to be sophisticated and powerful themselves. How do you differentiate? You could lead with technical specifications, but that's what everyone does. Instead, you might decide to lead with outcomes. Rather than talking about the features, you talk about the transformation of your customer's experience. Rather than listing capabilities, you tell stories of success. That's a strategic choice, and it cascades through every piece of communication you create. Your website changes, your sales material change, your conference presentations change, your social media changes, and it all stems from a decision made at the strategic level by the CMO. The second mechanism is campaign architecture. Most organizations run multiple campaigns throughout the year: product launches, seasonal promotions, thought leadership initiatives, recruitment drives, and so on. Without strong governance, these campaigns can easily work at cross purposes, diluting your message and confusing your audience. The CMO must establish a campaign architecture that ensures coherence. This means planning campaigns in an integrated way and understanding how they build on each other and ensuring they all ladder up to the overarching strategic narrative. It means being disciplined about sequencing, knowing when to launch and why. It means allocating resources thoughtfully, so you're not spreading yourself too thin. Practically speaking, this often takes the form of a marketing calendar or campaign roadmap that the CMO reviews and approves quarterly or annually. But it's more than just a scheduling exercise. It's about strategic orchestration, ensuring that every campaign serves the broader communication strategy. The third mechanism is stakeholder alignment. Here's the truth that many CMOs learn the hard way. Your communication strategy only works if the entire organization is behind it. The sales team need to understand it. Customer service needs to embody it. Product development needs to reflect it. Even finance and operations need to appreciate how their work supports it. This is why the CMO must be an internal communicator as much as an external one. You need to bring people along. You need to explain not just what the strategy is, but why it matters and how it connects to business outcomes. You need to create forums for dialogue and feedback. And crucially, you need to model the behavior you want to see. If your communication strategy emphasizes authenticity and transparency, you can't then operate in a closed top-down manner internally. If it emphasizes innovation and boldness, you need to encourage calculated risk-taking within your team. If it emphasizes customer eccentricity, you need to make sure the customer insights accessible and actionable across the organization. The fourth mechanism is measurement and iteration. Strategy without measurement is just hope. And as a CMO, you must establish clear metrics for evaluating whether your communication strategy is working. I don't just mean vanity metrics like impressions or followers. I mean metrics that connect to business outcomes like brand awareness, consideration, preference, customer lifetime value, advocacy, whatever matters most to your organization. But here's the sophisticated part. You also need to measure sentiment, resonance, and understanding. People are receiving your message the way you intend. Are they understanding your value proposition? Do they perceive you the way they want to be perceived? This requires both quantitative and qualitative surveys, research groups, social listening, media analysis, and then you can iterate. Communication strategy isn't set it and forget it. Markets evolve, competitors adapt, customer expectations shift. Cultural moments create new contexts. The CMO must be constantly learning from the feedback loops they've established and making adjustments accordingly. Now, some of you might be thinking, wait, doesn't the Chief Communications Officer handle all of this? And it's a fair question, because many larger organizations do have a CCO alongside a CMO. So, how do these roles relate? In my view, the healthiest dynamic is one where the CMO sets the strategic direction and the CCO executes it. The CMO defines what the organization needs to communicate and why. The CCO determines how to communicate it most effectively. So the CMO owns the what and the why, and the CCO owns the how and the when. But even in organizations with a separate communications function, the CMO cannot abdicate responsibility for the strategic voice, because ultimately, marketing and communications are two sides of the same coin. Marketing is about creating value for customers and capturing value for the business. Communications is how you articulate that value, build awareness of it, and persuade people to engage with it. In small organizations without a dedicated CCO, the CMO necessarily wears both hats. And honestly, there's something valuable about this integration. It prevents the disconnect that can sometimes emerge when strategy and execution live in different silos. It ensures that the person responsible for business outcomes also controls the primary lever for achieving them, the strategic voice. What's essential, regardless of the organizational structure, is that the CMO maintains strategic oversight over all communications. This means having approval rights over major campaigns and messaging. It means being involved in crisis communications planning. It means representing the voice of the customer and the market in executive decisions. It means ensuring that every touch point with the outside world reflects the strategic positioning you've worked so hard to establish. Let's be honest. Dictating communication strategy as a CMO isn't easy. There are significant challenges, and I've seen talented marketing leaders stumble in predictable ways. Let me share some of the most common pitfalls and how to avoid them. Well, the first pitfall is strategic drift. This happens when short-term pressures and opportunities cause you to lose sight of your long-term strategic direction. Maybe that's a trendy platform everyone's talking about, so you rush to establish a presence there without thinking about whether it serves your strategy. Maybe a competitor does something provocative, so you feel compelled to respond in kind. Maybe sales is pushing a particular message that doesn't align with your positioning. Strategic drift is insidious because each individual decision seems reasonable in isolation, but over time, they add up to a communications approach that's reactive rather than strategic, scattered rather than focus. The way to combat this is to have clear principles and to refer to them consistently. Before saying yes to any communications initiative, ask, does this serve our strategy? Does it strengthen our narrative? Does it bring us closer to our goals? The second pitfall is internal misalignment. I mentioned earlier that the CMO must be an internal communicator. This is because your communication strategy will fail if the rest of the organization doesn't understand it, or worse, actively undermines it. I've seen this happen when sales make promises that marketing can't keep, or when product launches features that contradict the brand positioning, or when customer service handles complaints in a way that feels inconsistent with the brand voice. Avoiding this pitfall requires constant internal evangelism. It requires bringing people into the process, showing them how their work connects to the communication strategy, and making it easy for them to do the right thing. It also requires executive support. If the CEO isn't backing your communication strategy, it's very difficult to achieve organizational wide alignment. The third pitfall is metric myopia. In our data-driven world, there's enormous pressure to demonstrate ROI for every marketing pound spent, and that's fair. You should be accountable for results. But the danger is you start optimizing exclusively for metrics that are easy to measure, even if they don't fully capture strategic success. For instance, it's easy to measure click-through rates on an email campaign, but it's much harder to measure whether that campaign strengthened brand perception in a way that will pay dividends over time. So you end up optimizing for clicks at the expense of brand building, or you chase short-term conversions at the expense of long-term loyalty. The way to avoid this is to establish a balanced scorecard that includes both short-term performance metrics and long-term strategic indicators. And you'll need to educate your organization about why both matter. Brand equity doesn't show up immediately on a P&L, but it's one of the most valuable assets a company can build. Your fourth pitfall is creative timidity. This one's subtle. In the desire to be strategic and disciplined, some CEOs become overly cautious. They're so focused on consistency and control that they squeeze out creativity and spontaneity. They say no to ideas that might be brilliant but feel risky. They create processes that are so righteous they stifle innovation. Great communication strategy provides a framework within which creativity can flourish. It's not a straitjacket. The best CMOs I know are the ones that can hold the strategic line while also creating space for bold creative thinking. They encourage their team to push the boundaries, test new approaches, and bring fresh perspectives, all within the guardrails of the strategic framework. Right, let's bring this home with some practical advice. If you're a CMO aspiring to be one, what should you do to actually effectively dictate communication strategy? Well, first, invest time in strategy development. This isn't something you can delegate entirely. Yes, you should involve your team. Yes, you should bring in external expertise when needed. But you need to be personally involved in crafting the strategy because you're the one who'll be held accountable for it. Block out dedicated time, days, not hours, to think deeply about your strategic positioning, your narrative, your audience, and your approach. Second, document everything. A strategy that lives only in your head is not a strategy. It needs to be written down, visualized, made accessible to everyone who needs it. Create that messaging framework I mentioned earlier. Develop a brand playbook. Write down your strategic principles. Make these documents living references that get referenced and updated regularly. Third, communicate the strategy relentlessly. You'll probably get sick of talking about it before most people truly understand it, and that's normal. Repetition is your friend. Find different ways to articulate the same core ideas. Tell stories that illustrate the strategy in action. Celebrate examples where people got it right. And be patient. Cultural change takes time. Fourth, empower your team. You can't execute communication strategy alone. You need talented people who understand the strategy, who can make good decisions with it. So hire well, train thoroughly, and when you trust your team to do their jobs, create clear decision-making frameworks so that they know when they have autonomy and when they need to escalate. And when they make mistakes, which they will, treat them as learning opportunities rather than catastrophes. Fifth, stay connected to the market. It's easy to get trapped in the bubble of your own organization, especially as you move into senior leadership. But the CMO must maintain direct contact with customers, partners, and market dynamics. Attend events, read up, talk to customers, monitor competitors, stay curious about emerging trends. This external perspective is what allows you to keep your communication strategy relevant and resonant. Sixth, build strategic partnerships. You can't do this alone. So surround yourself with excellent partners, agencies, consultancies, technology platforms, media partners, but be strategic about these relationships. Choose partners who genuinely understand your business and can elevate your thinking, not just execute your ideas, and invest in these relationships. The best partnerships are collaborative, not transactional. And finally, lead with courage. Effective communication strategy often requires making choices that feel uncomfortable. You might need to narrow your focus when others want you to broaden it. You might need to stick with a strategy when others want you to pivot. You might need to invest long-term branding building when there's pressure for short-term results. Trust your strategic judgment. Be willing to defend your choices and have the courage to stay on course. So let's bring this all together. The CMO's role in dictating communication strategy is fundamentally about the guardian and architect of the organization's strategic voice. It's about ensuring that every time the organization speaks, whether through advertising, content, social media, customer service, or any other channel, the voice is clear, consistent, and compelling. This requires the CMO to operate at multiple levels simultaneously. At the highest level, you're defining strategic positioning and narrative. At the middle level, you're orchestrating campaigns and channels. And at the ground level, you're ensuring execution, excellence, and continuous improvement. And threading through all of it is the need to align stakeholders, empower teams, and drive business outcomes. It's challenging work, but it's immensely rewarding. When you get it right, you create a communication strategy that resonates. The results can be transformative. You build brands that people love. You create customer relationships that endure. You drive business performance in sustainable ways. You establish competitive advantage that's difficult to replicate. And perhaps, most importantly, you create meaning. In a world that's increasingly noisy and fragmented, organizations that can communicate with clarity and purpose stand out. They attract not just customers, but believers, people who share their values, support their mission, and become advocates for their cause. That's the power of strategic communication, and that's why the CMO's role in dictating the strategy is vital. It's not about marketing. It's not about shaping how the organization shows up in the world. It's about building something larger than any individual campaign or initiative. It's about creating a voice that matters. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I hope you found it valuable, whether you're a CMO, a fractional CMO yourself, or you're working with one, or you're simply interested in how great brands are built. If you have any thoughts or questions about anything I've discussed today, I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep thinking strategically, communicating clearly, and leading courageously.
Thanks for listening to the Matuta podcast, bringing you the latest insights into transformational business, coaching, ABM, automated marketing, and AI solutions. If you liked this episode, please like, rate, and share.